A new government bill could destroy your medical school dreams. Now, despite the name, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, it's not so beautiful for students. And what's become a hugely controversial piece of legislation could slash student loan availability, making it even harder to become a doctor. It passed the House by a narrow margin, and if it passes the Senate, it would fundamentally change how you pay for college and med school and make residency an even more challenging experience than it already is. So this raises the question, are we building a system that selects the best and brightest, or simply the wealthiest? Stick around until the end when I discuss the long-term impact this will have on the future of our country. Now let's get into it. What's exactly in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act? It's being marketed as a way to save the federal government about $350 billion over the next 10 years. Sounds great on paper, but where do those savings actually come from? This legislation proposes cuts to virtually every major federal student aid program, graduate loans, residency support, even Pell grants. And the changes don't just affect future borrowers. They reshape repayment, forgiveness, and even how much debt you can take on in the first place. Now let's dive in. First off, they're eliminating subsidized federal direct Stafford loans. That means if you're an undergraduate student from a lower income background, you'll no longer get interest-free support while you're in school, during your grace period, or if you defer. Now, I actually received these loans myself in college, and without them, being a pre-med, getting into med school, it would have been way more difficult to become a doctor. Knowing the interest wasn't piling up while I was buried in coursework gave me the breathing room to focus on learning instead of stressing about the mounting debt. If this change goes through, the interest-free window is gone. You'll start accruing interest the day your loan is disbursed. For most students, this change alone will bump their total debt burden by about 15% by graduation. That's thousands of dollars in extra interest simply because the government decided to pull the plug. And it gets worse. Second, the bill proposes eliminating Grad PLUS. For med students, this one's huge. Grad PLUS loans would be eliminated for any new borrower starting in the 2026 to 27 academic year. If you're not familiar, Grad PLUS is what lets students borrow up to the full cost of attendance for graduate and professional school, including living expenses. Without it, you're capped. And that cap is now significantly lower. We'll get into that in a second. Third, Parent Plus loans. Currently, there's no aggregate limit on Parent Plus loans. Under the new bill, they're capped at $50,000 total. And that's not per child, that's per family. So if your parents are trying to help more than one kid through college, they're gonna hit that cap fast. There's no income-driven repayment, no forgiveness options, and no real protections if something unexpected happens. Just rigid contracts and compounding interest. This pushes families, particularly those without generational wealth, toward private lending, which is a much riskier path with major long-term financial consequences. Private lending is a terrible, terrible option. I really cannot stress that enough. There's no deferment, no federal protections, far higher interest rates, and worse terms. Do whatever you can to avoid private loans as a student in the US. And this next one is brutal. Across the board, the bill imposes hard caps on federal student loans. Undergrad students can borrow up to $50,000 total. Graduate students are capped at $100,000. Professional students, including med students, get a max of $150,000, and the lifetime federal borrowing limit, $200,000 flat. That's it. Now, that may sound like a lot, but let's put that into perspective. The average med student graduates with over $260,000 in student loan debt. If this passes, you're looking at an extra $60,000 to $110,000 gap. Where is that extra $60,000 to $110K gonna come from? While this may be okay for some families, many families, most families, don't have that kind of money laying around. But things are much worse than that for many students because $260K, that's only the average debt. Some students can have upwards of $400,000 in medical school debt, meaning there's another $250K to cover with other much riskier loans. And keep in mind that we're looking at medical school debt as it stands in 2025. The average debt continues to increase with rising tuition costs, so if the cap remains set at $150K, the difference that medical students are left to cover will continue to rise year after year. If you don't have rich parents or massive savings, that's a serious roadblock. Next, starting in July 2026, all new borrowers will have just two repayment options: a standard plan with fixed payments over 10 to 25 years, and a new repayment assistance plan, or RAP. RAP replaces most current income-driven repayment plans like Save or Pay. On the surface, it sounds decent, payments range from 1 to 10% of your income with a minimum of $10 a month. But loan forgiveness under RAP only kicks in after 30 years of payments. That's up from the 20 to 25-year windows we have now. And those payments? For many borrowers, they'll actually be higher than under the SAVE plan by about $3,000 a year on average. So yes, it's simpler, but it's also more expensive, especially in the long run. And they're also cutting back on the safety nets. Economic hardship and unemployment deferments will no longer be available for loans issued after 2025. And forbearance will be capped at 9 months per 2-year period. You do get the ability to rehabilitate a defaulted loan twice instead of once, but that's cold comfort for people just trying to keep their head above water. And this next point hits med students again. The bill says that any payments made during residency won't count toward public service loan forgiveness or PSLF. Since residency can last anywhere from 3 to 7 years, this is particularly devastating as that's a huge chunk of your early career. And if you're working in public service, especially in underserved areas, you are probably counting on those years to count toward your 10-year forgiveness plan. This bill wipes that out. The bill also ties the hands of the Department of Education, preventing future administrations from issuing new regulations that increase loan forgiveness or expand protections for borrowers. So any future fixes to the system will be much harder to pull off. Next, even Pell grants aren't safe. To qualify for the full award, students would now need to complete 15 credits per semester or 30 per year. That makes it way harder for part-time or working students to qualify. And a change to how eligibility is calculated could disqualify over 60% of recipients, according to the SBPC. The only expansion is that Pell grants would now apply to short-term workforce training programs, even those offered by unaccredited providers. That raises big concerns about abuse, predatory programs, and whether students will actually get value out of those certificates. Finally, the bill includes a new risk-sharing model where colleges are on the hook for a portion of unpaid student debt. On paper, that might incentivize schools to keep costs in check, but it's more likely to result in fewer admissions for high-risk students or reductions in support services. So, what does all of this actually mean for you? If you're a student right now, or planning to become one, this bill makes college and grad school significantly more expensive, at least if you're not from a wealthy background. You're going to lose access to subsidized interest protection, have to borrow more from private lenders with higher rates and fewer protections, face higher monthly payments under the new repayment plan, wait 30 years for forgiveness if you qualify at all, and possibly see your Pell grant cut or eliminated. And if you're a future doctor, this hits even harder. The average cost of med school tuition alone, it's already absurd. Add living expenses, exam fees, residency relocation, and lost income during training. It's no wonder most med students lean heavily on Grad PLUS. Take that away, and suddenly studying medicine becomes a luxury only the wealthy can afford. The $150,000 cap doesn't come close to covering what you'll need. Plus, the loss of PSLF during residency removes a major incentive for anyone thinking of going into public service. And the limited repayment options could leave you with mountains of debt and limited relief. And here's where it goes beyond just your personal finances. We're already facing a massive physician shortage in the US, nearly 190,000 doctors short by 2037. Making medical education less accessible could exacerbate this trend, discouraging qualified students from entering the field, particularly those who lack financial backing. If the bill passes, we're not just limiting access to education, we're redefining who gets to become a doctor in the US. Not based on talent, not based on grit or work ethic, but based on who can afford it. Now, when you limit access to education, whether it's medicine or law, engineering, science, you're not selecting for the most capable. You're selecting for the most privileged. And that has serious long-term consequences for our healthcare system and the country as a whole. If the US wants to continue being the most powerful and innovative country in the world, we must give gifted, hardworking people every opportunity to succeed, rather than leaving those opportunities only to those who have the most resources due to their family situation, and just winning the genetic lottery due to blind luck. This isn't just a student debt issue. It's a national strategy issue. Look, I'm not one of those people that thinks that the US needs to become socialist or communist. Absolutely not. But I am one of those people that was born without financial privilege. And I had to pay for my own college, my own med school, buy my own house. Like, these little things, they don't sound like much, but speaking with others, it is such a huge advantage when you already have your college covered, your med school covered, your down payment on your house covered, when houses are, as it compares to your income, insanely expensive and the most expensive they have ever been in US history. It is such a massive leg up, and it's hard for other people without these massive legs up to even be part of the conversation. I mean, if you were to take the equivalent of a med student's loans and combine that with the down payment, put that in the S&P 500 from when you're mid-20s until 65, you have $20 million. There is a huge, massive leg up that those who come from wealthy families already have. And this is not about woe is me, right? I'm doing fine. This is for the other students. And it is harder. It is harder. Like, if you are South Asian, as I am, and you come from a less privileged background, not only do you lack the financial backing, but now you also need to get higher stats to get into college and med school, which is absolutely insane. South Asians and East Asians are overrepresented in medicine, and there are hard data and lawsuits that you can look up as well, where these groups need to outperform their peers. So I guess what it comes down to for me is that, kind of like Formula One, for those who are also fans like me, it's very much a sport that only the few privileged can actually play. And you're going to find exceptions to that. That's why I love Lewis Hamilton's story and Esteban Ocon's story. But for the most part, you have to pay to play. And we're not talking regular white-collar jobs. Like, you really need to pay to play. And you don't want medicine and these other professions to be the same way. You want it to be a true meritocracy. You want it that those with the skills, the grit, the determination are given equal footing with their more wealthy or financially backed peers so that they're not at a huge disadvantage, because you want the best and brightest to become doctors. And fewer doctors today and lower quality doctors can become a serious shortage and a serious issue for all of us as patients tomorrow. If you want to see just how bad it could get, watch this video right up here.